exports during the first 10 days of June expanded on year, while the benchmark Kospi rose past the 2,900 mark for the first time in over 3 years this week. With more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome. You're watching Press Perspective for Thursday, June 12th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Findings for the first 10 days of this month show an expansion in exports on year, while investors in the local bourse appear optimistic about business prospects. However, according to analysts here, broader economic concerns remain in place for South Korea amid the presence of U.S. tariffs on imports into its market. For more on this, I have Lee Ji-hoon with Reuters here in the studio. Ji-hoon, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Glad to be here.
I also have Celio Fioretti with us, with the French daily Le Croix. Celio, welcome back.
Glad to be here.
Ji-hoon, we will start with you. Let's begin with some favorable news then. As I mentioned at the start, there has been a rise in South Korea's exports during the first 10 days of this month. Let's start with that piece of news.
Yeah, data showed yesterday exports rose 5.4% during the first 10 days of this month, after falling in May for the first time in 4 months. Exports to the U.S. rose 3.9%, and China also rose 2.9%. By product, semiconductors continued to rise by gaining 22%, while autos also rose 8.4%. Economists said there have been some signs that the trade between U.S. and China is increasing after their trade truce in mid-May. But these 10-day figures are often volatile, and the Bank of Korea said recently that the impact of U.S. tariffs has not been fully materialized, so we still need some time to make any assessment. According to the Bank of Korea, automakers so far have responded to U.S. tariffs by utilizing its existing stocks in the U.S. And when it comes to steel, there is some time lag for shipments, so the effect of U.S. tariffs will come into effect from the third quarter of this year.
Right. And staying with this rather cautious tone then, Celio, the latest evaluation of the South Korean economy by the state-run Korea Development Institute, that is, which is quite bleak. Could you tell us more?
Well, indeed, South Korea's economy is starting to show some worrying sign, at least according to the Korean Development Institute, the KDI. In its June economic trends report, KDI said the country is losing overall vitality, which means the economy isn't bouncing back the way it should. Construction industry is in a deep slump, and at the same time, rising U.S. tariff is putting extra pressure on South Korean economy. Put together, the two factors are creating a sort of drag that is hard to not to just ignore. KDI hasn't used a strong language like that in over 2 years, and it's not just a tone. If you look at the number, it is worrying. Construction output fell by more than 16% in March and 20% in April. That kind of decline doesn't just affect the builders. It's the whole economy that is affected by this slowdown. Overall production also it's been harder for producers in the country. Manufacturing is doing well in some sectors, especially the key sectors like semiconductors, which grew more by 20%, but that's quite unique, actually. In the rest of the industry, total industrial growth fell from 0.9% in March to just 0.5% in April, mainly because how badly the construction industry is evolving. It's often overlooked, but construction is really the core of any economy in the world, and if you don't build, you don't produce. Despite all this, at the same time, exports, as we mentioned with U.S. tariff, are starting to dip. Last month, export to the U.S. dropped by more than 8%, and especially auto exports fell high, down 32%. And starting this month, U.S. tariff on auto parts and steel and aluminum will increase from 25% to 50%. That's expected to hurt even more the South Korean economy. Despite all this negative news, there's still a bit of positive. Finally, we have a new government. The election went accordingly to the law, no issues on that, and consumers have been reassured in their economy, in the way forward. So now the task is for the new government to set up a plan to fix the US issue, lead Korea on a better track for the economy.
Right, which is why they've been talking about a supplementary budget to bolster the economy and to boost consumption. Ji-hoon, despite the broader economic concerns here, the Korean stock market, for its part, it's been rallying this week. What appears to be fueling this rally?
Yeah, in the stock market, the Kospi has been rallying since President Lee won the election last week to hit the highest level in nearly 3.5 years. As you know, foreigners left the market when political uncertainty was heightened by martial law in December. But analysts are saying they are now returning after the election because they resolved the uncertainty. Foreigners have been leading the rally by buying around 4 trillion won of local stocks since President Lee's election victory last week. And analysts say there have been two main policy pledges of President Lee that are driving this rally. First is his expansionary fiscal policy. Economic recovery has been his top priority since his inauguration. And his administration is, as you said, already preparing an extra budget for second one for this year, which is expected to be way bigger than the first one passed in May of 13.8 trillion won. Analysts expect the second one to include some cash-like vouchers for consumers to boost domestic demand and forgiving debt for small businesses which are hurt by the COVID-19 pandemic. Another driver of the stock market rally has been President Lee's push for capital market reforms. He has emphasized several times that he would seek to resolve the so-called Korea discount, which is a tendency of undervaluation compared with global peers due to low dividend payouts and opaque corporate governance. Yesterday, he visited the Croix exchange and said the government is considering tax code revisions to encourage higher dividend payouts by companies. And he also vowed measures to prevent unfair trading practices. And he used the phrase one strikeout system to punish or prevent such practices. His Democratic Party already reintroduced an amendment to the Commercial Act, which expands fiduciary duty of board members to minor shareholders. And it is expected to be passed within this month. And his Democratic Party holds a big majority in parliament. So that is why market participants are expecting President Lee's economic policies and market policies to be aggressive.
Right. Meanwhile, Celio, beyond borders, a major concern for the Lee Jae-myung administration, as is the case for quite a number of administrations across the world, is probably the Trump administration's tariff policy. Based on what has been shared by President Lee during his campaign, also based on the conversation that he had with his US counterpart Donald Trump last week, what are your thoughts with regard to prospects of a productive deal on the tariff front between these two countries, South Korea and the US?
As you just mentioned, South Korean new President Lee Jae-myung stepped in the office with a critical file on his desk, US tariff. During his campaign, he explained that he would not rush to strike a deal with Trump, especially a deal that would not be beneficial for South Korea. Also, Lee Jae-myung wants to remain friendly with China, which is still a major trading partner for Korea and a close neighbor. In his very first call with US President Donald Trump this week, the two leaders agreed to push for a swift agreement on trade, and with a good reason. As we mentioned before, under Trump's tariff, South Korean goods have increased sharply. US tariff on South Korean goods have increased sharply, despite the long-standing free trade deal between the two countries, from steel to aluminum to auto parts. Korean industries have been feeling the pressure, and it's only going to increase more and more, and South Korean economy will be hit more and more, so the clock is really ticking in the Blue House. South Korea's economy, as we know, is deeply driven by exports and highly vulnerable for to U.S. trade policy. Whether it's semiconductors or cars, shipbuilding, Korean firms rely heavily on access to the American markets, and especially on these key sectors of the Korean economy. That's why the outcome of this tariff negotiation will be important for the future of the Korean economy. It's really a make or break moment for the country. Lee Jae-myung already said that trade with US is a priority for his mandate, for his term, but talks have been delayed to the political transition in Seoul. The idea to reach a so-called July package with Trump might happen. Maybe we'll see the conversation. At least for now, the first phone call they had between the two leaders is showing some progress. Still, the economic tension is important, and Lee Jae-myung wants to navigate between China and the US. It's a hard game. It's really difficult to maintain this balance. We'll see if he managed to do it, but he will have to do it soon because the clock is ticking.
Right. In the meantime, the President, Ji-hoon, has tapped former Chief Trade Envoy Yo Han-gu as the new administration's top trade negotiator. Could you tell us a bit about this man, Yo Han-gu, and the experience he brings into the new administration?
New trade chief Yo Han-gu is a seasoned trade expert who already has experience of negotiating with the Trump administration. He served the same role under former President Moon Jae-in's administration as in 2021 and 2022, and before that, he took part in negotiating with the Trump administration over the amendment of the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement as a commercial officer at the Korean embassy in Washington. Today, he said he will accelerate senior-level trade talks with the U.S. Because now that we have a new administration. And according to an interview with Japanese media, he said South Korea and Japan should work together for exemptions from auto tariffs and over the energy issue.
Right. With regard to South Korea's negotiations, upcoming negotiations with the U.S. regarding the tariff campaign, you earlier covered the likelihood of the new administration potentially asking for more time to hammer out a deal with the U.S. What have you been hearing on the ground?
So according to my sources, President Lee's strategy is to buy time to watch negotiations of other countries such as Japan and China. And also the changes in U.S. tariff policies, because President Trump just said today or overnight he was open to extending deadline for some trading partners. During President Lee's election campaign, he said he did not make any specific comments about any contentious issues regarding trade talks, and my sources said that was his strategic decision to be silent. They said, my sources said the new administration is likely to watch negotiations of Japan, especially because it is in similar situation with South Korea, and or watch China as well, because main U.S. policies might change depending on the progress in its trade talks with Beijing. If South Korea decides to work together with either of the countries, it will more likely be with Japan because they share interest in auto tariffs as well as energy purchases, as new trade chief Yo Han-gu just said in an interview. My sources say South Korea will have to ask for an extension on the deadline of July 8th, but it is unlikely Mr. Lee will immediately ask for that. His senior diplomacy advisor said that he sees such requests being made after the new administration takes a review at the progress. One of my sources said next week's G7 summit might be an opportunity for President Lee to ask for an exemption because he is invited to attend the summit in Canada next week. And there are views that South Korea is better positioned than other countries to strike a favorable deal because of its strength in key sectors of U.S. interest, such as shipbuilding and technology, and semiconductors. And my sources are saying that is more the reasons the new administration does not have to rush to strike a quick deal with the U.S.
Right. And speaking about the U.S.'s trade talks with China, they took place earlier this week over in London, and an agreement was struck. Could you tell us a bit about that, Celio?
Indeed, the U.S. and China have reached a preliminary agreement on trade, potentially a major breakthrough after months of rising tension between the two largest economies in the world. After 2 days of high-level talks in London, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said both sides have agreed on a framework to implement what's being called the Geneva Consensus, reference to the 90-day suspension of tariff both countries agreed to last month. Chinese officials confirmed the deal also, but stressed it still needs approval from the presidential office, both in Beijing and in Washington. The deal is seen as a de-escalation, a chance to pause, if not end, the trade war between the two countries, a trade war that rattled all the global markets and all the economies in the world, but it's far from finalized. Analysts said some key issues remain unresolved and will still need some talk between the two leaders. This morning, Trump said the deal was done, that rare earth material will be exported from China to the U.S. Chinese students will also be allowed to go back to U.S. campus to study, but China will keep a 55% tariff on exports to the U.S. Still, we haven't seen the actual treaty, the actual deal, the text, the full text of it. So maybe the devil lies in the details, and we'll see how it can really be implemented, how long it will take, and also how long it will last. Because experts warn this deal is not just leverage, it's more about putting pressure on everyone. As we saw maybe during the Cold War with the nuclear weapon, it's about warning the other that you can destroy them. And maybe this pressure, this deal is just temporarily fixed of the two countries, of the relation between the two countries. We'll see how it's implemented and how long it will last.
Right. In the meantime, June, as Celio mentioned earlier, it's been slightly over a week since the Trump administration raised tariffs on steel and aluminum imports into the American market from 25% to 50%. What has been the response from the government here and businesses?
Yeah, South Korea is fourth largest exporter of steel products to the United States, and it has already prepared an emergency package for steel companies after the 25% initial tariff was introduced. And South Korea recently said it will prepare more measures if necessary. After the tariff raised to 50%, the industry ministry held an emergency meeting again with steelmakers and said it will actively respond as it negotiates tariffs with the United States. Among major companies, Hyundai Steel already announced they plan to build a production site in the United States, and POSCO said it will join, but this is a long-term project which will take time. And when it comes to exports, as I said earlier, the Bank of Korea said the impact of U.S. tariffs have not yet come into reality, and they will start to materialize from the third quarter of the year. So that is another thing that will take time to make any assessment so far.
Right, so we'll have to wait and see then. Celio, amid the uncertainty over global trade in the presence of U.S. tariffs, South Korea and Thailand, they're seeking to frame out a fresh economic partnership. Could you give us some details?
Exactly. Finally, some good news in this chaotic economic world. In a move to deepen economic cooperation, Thailand and South Korea are launching negotiation for a new free trade agreement called the Thailand-South Korea EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement. The announcement came after a meeting between Thailand's commerce minister and the South Korean ambassador in Bangkok. The goal is to expand trade, basically services also, but also investment between the two countries, building on existing relation and agreement within the ASEAN and Korean FTA regional commerce comprehensive partnerships. This new pact is designed to go further with a special focus on digital trade, supply chains, and strategic sectors like semiconductors, robotic, and biotechnology. Thailand also hopes to open more of the South Korean markets to its premium exports, which is mainly agricultural, including tropical fruits, seafood, and processed chicken. We know fruits are quite expensive here in Korea, so it might be good news for also the Korean consumer. Overall, this trade deal is a good sign, maybe a good strategy. It's very smart to expand new partnerships, create new opportunities outside of the American market, which is a bit difficult to access these days, and having more reliable partners, maybe smaller, but still reliable, in the Pacific region, in Europe, in Africa. Maybe that's a good deal to also evade the pressure from the US. One major highlight from this is South Korea is a massive investor in Thailand, is the 6th largest investor in the countries, and major Korean companies are implementing factories there. I've been to Thailand last year, and you can see a lot of Korean products on the shelves in the supermarkets. So there really is a lot of things to do, a lot of cooperation, a lot of room for discussion and improvement. So it's going in the right direction, I would say.
Right, diversifying markets is something that scholars have also been saying would be necessary. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Celio, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Ji-hoon, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching.